Communication Crypt, Brooke speaking. Which malign media are we digging into today?
Yeah, I'm interested about body horror.
Mm-hmm.
The one where bodies are decaying on screen.
You forgot the bubbling and melting of flesh, ma'am.
Yeah, I just don't understand why anyone would want to see that.
You called the right place. The Communication Crypt. Welcome into the Communication Crypt. My name is Brooke, and this is a series called Fandom Unearthed, where I'm going to reintroduce maligned or misunderstood media that deserves a second look. And for the first episode, we're talking about one of my favorites, body horror film. Let's start with the tombstone text. This is where I'm going to introduce you or familiarize you to the media in question. Now, when I say text, I don't mean something that's just written down. In media studies, text means any cultural artifact that can be interpreted. Anything from literature, of course, but also film, television shows, even memes or paintings. And media is the form or channel that delivers the text. So, for example, the text is the message that's carved onto the tombstone, and then the media is the tombstone itself. And yeah, a tombstone is media. And the media in focus for episode 1 is body horror film. Now, body horror didn't start with film. Long before body horror was coined as a term, cultures told stories about the body being a site of transformation and mutilation. This can be traced back as far as classic Greek mythology, such as the story of Medusa, where a woman's body was transformed into something monstrous with snakes for hair and a gaze that turned people to stone as punishment. Even religious texts like the Bible feature stories of body horror, like in the book of Exodus, Moses confronts Pharaoh and Egypt is struck with 10 plagues, one of which is a plague of boils. Quote, festering boils broke out on people and animals throughout Egypt. Ouch. Moving forward quite a bit to the late 1700s, early 1800s, we had Gothic literature. We had Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which featured themes of body horror, where a man is quite literally built from the remains of a dead person, and throughout the story, he struggles to recognize and control his own body. These stories from Gothic lit that played with bodily autonomy were eventually adapted into film in the 1900s. Of course, Frankenstein. There was also Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde that was popular as well.
It's alive. It's alive. It's moving.
Now, I know I'm moving rather quickly, but there's so much to get to, and this next part is really interesting. After World War II and the atomic bomb, global fears spread very quickly about invisible contamination and radiation. Because of this, we saw another shift in body horror that focused more on mutation and contamination. Around this time, we had movies like Invasion of the Body Snatchers in 1956. That story introduced a world where your body could be copied, emptied, and then disposed of while you were sleeping. There was also The Incredible Shrinking Man in 1957, where a man exposed to radioactive mist had begun shrinking uncontrollably. And then, of course, in 1958, there was The Fly, where a scientist's body fused with a fly during an experiment. Although this era is not technically labeled as body horror, it's still very crucial to the genre because it introduced the idea of the body being affected by some external force. And then it brings me to the holy grail of the genre, the Cronenberg era, or 1970 through 1980. You cannot talk about body horror without talking about the king, David Cronenberg. He's a Canadian director known for his permeable take on the human body in horror. The body can be penetrated, the body is not solid, and he makes sure that you know that through his film. He wasn't so much obsessed with monsters attacking the body from the outside, but what happens when the body becomes the monster and starts to decompose from within. So, very different from the previous era of body horror type of film. The Cronenberg film that really took off was Shivers. This follows a parasitic infection that turns residents hypersexual and violent. It uses contagion as a metaphor for social breakdown and desire, and of course, the fear of losing control over your own body. Following his major breakthrough with Shivers, there was Rabid, The Brood, Scanners, Videodrome, The Fly, Dead Ringers, one after another, each body horror film challenging the idea of what we want out of our own bodies. You know when you're watching a Cronenberg film because transformation is not just terrifying, it's intimate and a little erotic. In a Cronenberg, the body doesn't just break down, it changes. And the real horror is that you might just want it to. Now, David Cronenberg did not invent body horror, though he is the king, right? But he did make it into a recognizable form that's singular from any other horror subgenre. That's why he's the king. But I would be stupid not to mention other directors that had big influence during this time on the body horror genre, like John Carpenter with movies like The Thing, of course, Stuart Gordon with films like Reanimator, and I will not mention body horror without mentioning Clive Barker with his films like Hellraiser. Now, this is the era where body horror was officially coined as a term by scholar Philip Brophy. In his essay titled Horality, the Textuality of the Contemporary Horror Film, he used the phrase body horror to describe this new wave of films obsessed with the deconstruction, mutation, and transformation of the human body. Everything that I've been talking about up until this point is now known as body horror, and everything here on out. And body horror is very much a genre that we see in film today. Like in 2024, there was Coralie Farge's The Substance. And I wouldn't say that this film is mainstream, but it definitely got some attention from the Academy. And in 2025, we had Michael Shank's film Together. But despite being recognized by the Academy and a subgenre that has existed many centuries, it has made its way onto Fandom Unearthed because by most people, body horror is considered to be lowbrow. So now that we've traced the lineage of body horror, let's open up the Communication Codex. In this section, I'm going to introduce parts of the Communication Codex, or a collection of academic research that can help us make sense as to why body horror is maligned, why people are turned off by it. And while there are so many reasons as to why people might not like body horror, there's one in particular that I want to talk about that I think a lot of people can relate to. And it's the idea that body horror violates cultural taboos about the body. This is where I want to introduce research from anthropologist Mary Douglas. In Purity and Danger, she argues that societies maintain order by deciding what counts as clean or proper or in place, and anything that violates this becomes a threat. She has this idea, and she argues that dirt or things that are improper is simply matter out of place. She's arguing that the disgust that we have isn't in the thing itself, but it's about the rules that it breaks. I mean, in so many ways, we are taught to hide the body transitioning and aging in Western culture. Think about things like filler or facelifts, even things that are a little bit less, surgical, like hair dye or wearing certain makeup or wearing certain clothes that make you appear younger than you actually are. And connecting that back to Mary Douglas's idea, it's not the idea theoretically of aging that freaks people out, but it's this idea of physically looking like you're aging that we are taught to be
Let's just
afraid
call
of.
it as it is. Robin, first of all, is too old to be starting
And fat.
model.
She's huge. She's not going to be a top model.
She won't. That's the reality. That's what
Now, Mary Douglas isn't talking about body horror. In fact, she's not even talking about media, but you can apply her same ideas to film itself. So therefore, when you see the body deconstructing on screen, like in body horror, right, you see the body deteriorating, becoming disformed, becoming disabled. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable because we are taught to be uncomfortable with those signs of rapid aging and those signs of decomposition. And so, therefore, body horror is often seen as bad because discomfort is often mislabeled as bad. The next time that you feel uncomfortable watching something, try to think about it beyond the fact that it's disturbing imagery on the screen. It might be a little bit more deep rooted than it looks disgusting. It might be something that you were taught to be disgusted by. So, we've cracked open the Communication Codex, talked a little bit about the cultural rules that shape our fears, and why some people might be rather uncomfortable watching body horror because it reminds us of the things that we are taught not to do. Show physical signs of aging and deterioration. So now it's time to leave those dusty, crusty pages behind and enter something that's very much alive, the next segment, which is the Living Archive. In this segment, I'm going to feature interviews from real fans that I conducted over the past couple of weeks to help us realize that body horror isn't just theory, but it's actually a lived experience. So let's scan the grave for our first guest. All right, I want to welcome into the crypt E.J. Newton from Southern Illinois. She is currently studying at Eastern Illinois University as a graduate student in media and critical studies. She happens to be working on her master's thesis titled Boys Don't Die, Conceptualizing a Final Boy of 1980s Horror. And she also happens to be a great friend of mine and a brilliant mind, and of course, a huge body horror fan. EJ, welcome to the crypt.
I am so happy to be in the crypt. Thank you, Brooke.
It's a lot easier to focus on one or two specific pieces of media. And you suggested to me to watch Brian Yesna's 1984 film Society. And it's a film about a teenager that discovers the wealthy elite are literally consuming and reshaping the bodies of others to maintain power. That's certainly a powerful message to be thinking about right now, specifically. And in terms of body horror, I thought it really delivers because it's goopy, it's mangled, and at times it's kind of sexy.
How do you like your tea? Cream, sugar, or do you want me to pee in it?
Now, in 2022 on Letterboxd, you quoted the film and you said, quote, "If you don't follow the rules, Billy, bad things will happen. Now, some people make the rules and some people follow the rules. It's a question of what you're born into." This is a great quote. I like that you quoted this. It's something that I wrote down in my notes when I was watching the film. I like how it challenges us to think about the way our own societal structures and rules in our reality are written to uplift those who are already uplifted. But something that I would argue is that a lot of different types of film beyond body horror comment on this theme, like The Hunger Games or The Truman Show or even The Wizard of Oz. So what I'm curious about is, what is it about body horror films like Society that allows filmmakers to express about power and hierarchy that other genres can't?
That's a good question. For me, I think body horror does a good job of taking a danger and making it really personal and visceral. Like, we can talk about structures in society that are screwing people over and feel like they are sucking the life out of you, but it remains like there remains a distance because it is, government organizations and then the people that are being oppressed by them. But when it's body horror, it's such a direct and specific threat of you are connected to this fleshy, vulnerable thing that can be violated then. And then when you actually see it happen and you hear it happen, especially because audio is so important to body horror, it gives you this like immediate sense of danger and dread. Because that's something we all have in common, is that we're tied to a physical body and that physical bodies deteriorate. And at the end of the day, we are very weak and susceptible to that kind of danger. So I think converting the themes of danger and oppression into a threat to the physical body is really effective.
Would you say that watching bodies being distorted and mangled makes the film's social commentary feel more unavoidable?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. It
Yeah.
feels direct and targeted and immediate. Because we can look at these systems of power and oppression that are screwing over the working class. But then when you actually turn that danger into a society of, are they aliens? Are they supernatural beings? Kind of doesn't get confirmed, but that are quite literally consuming, eating, chewing up, and spitting back out the working class, it makes that danger more immediate and a lot more tangible.
The themes of power and hierarchy are at the forefront of society. And I think it's an interesting conversation, but I would like to transition to a conversation that I know that you're dissecting in your research that I mentioned earlier, titled Boys Don't Die, Conceptualizing a Final Boy in 1980s Horror. Great title, by the way.
Thank you.
And from what I understand, you're exploring the concept of gender norms in this research. Is that correct?
That's completely correct. Yep.
How does seeing the male body treated this way in society shape your understanding of gender, whether it's in the film or in reality?
Well, in my thesis, I'm focusing a lot on the permeability of the male body. In general, when we have a male protagonist, his role is to be the one doing the penetrating. In sexual relationships, heterosexual relationships, the idea is that the male will penetrate the female. And then when it comes to homosexual relationships, there is a stigma against the male being penetrated.
Mhm.
So a lot of these final boy movies, I'm arguing, have this threat of the male body being penetrated. And the final boy only gets to survive to the end of the movie if he is able to resist the penetration from the threatening force. So we see the threat to Bill of his body being violated and penetrated. And we see he's able to survive at the end when he finally is the one who literally takes his fist and impales the bully character.
Yes.
He literally kisses Bill, which is really interesting. Bill takes his fist and impales or penetrates the other man and is able to escape because his body was not violated. The threat too, like while we're talking about like the threat feeling so severe and personal and close, when you have that like giant mass and you see the extent of what's going on and you see how giant this giant group that's all connected together, it makes it feel way more, it makes the threat really intense.
I think that raises a interesting question about these types of films often destabilize the boundaries of the body. Clearly, we're transitioning into one mass. How do you think that opens up a space for thinking about gender as something that's fluid or constructed?
That's a really fun question. I think that a lot of body horror movies end up touching on gender because our idea of gender is so tied to sex, which is tied to the body. When you open up the possibility for the physical body to change and evolve, you open up the possibility for sex to change and evolve, therefore making gender less stable. So when you see all of these, the wealthy elites are combining and their genders are not mattering as much anymore because they're just one big mass, it definitely threatens the solidity of gender. And I think that that also is something I'm going to be touching on in my thesis when it comes to the permeability of the male body and things like that. At the end of this movie, Bill is able to escape fully solidly himself with his body having not been altered or changed. So he's being sort of rewarded for adhering to this solid, unchanging masculinity.
When you think about Billy's struggle to fit into a world with these rigid expectations, I'm going to ask a personal question. Feel free to respond at whatever extent you want to. Do these themes echo any experiences that you've had with gender norms or social pressure at all?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a openly queer person who was raised in a very religious, conservative homeschool community. So I definitely grew up feeling like I was being put into a box that I didn't feel fit me and fit my gender expression. But there's definitely a feeling of danger when it comes to defying the norms of the society that you're put the society that you are forced into. And I think that is part of why this movie resonated with me, because we see Bill feeling like he is not fitting in with the people around him, but he also is unable to pinpoint exactly why, because everyone in his life is sort of gaslighting him about what's going on. It definitely, the themes of that, of feeling like a misfit and feeling like you don't fit in and there's something that everyone else is in on that you are just not being told, I think is thematically going to ring true for a lot of queer people who watch the movie. And just anyone who's felt marginalized, bullied, even if you're not queer, but you just are, there's something in your life that you feel like everyone has been given this secret that I'm not in on. That's something a lot of us can relate to, I think.
EJ's connection to body horror is a great example of what queer theorists like Halberstam argue, that monstrous bodies can become a site of identification rather than a site of rejection, right? So when the world tells you that your body is wrong, body horror can feel strangely comforting and honest. And so it can become a site of catharsis for people, right? Whether you're seeing your representation of your own identity figuratively or quite literally on screen. Now, I want to introduce our next fan who brings a different kind of honesty to the archive. So welcome to the Crypt, Justin, founder of the Slasher Talk podcast, based out of Nashville, Tennessee. Slasher Talk is a space that Justin has created to discuss not just horror films, but truly some wild and maligned content. He's known for having some of the most jarring hooks on his videos, like, quote, "Trust me, you'll never forget watching this movie. Yes, this movie has a girl with a butthole for a mouth." And he always does so with enthusiasm and professionalism. So I appreciate that. Justin, welcome to the Crypt.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Thank you. That's quite the intro.
Yeah. Now on Instagram, you posted a reel describing disturbing movies that you love. And on top of your list was a film called Tusk. Now, for those who may not know this film, this movie follows a podcaster, which is fitting, who is kidnapped by a lonely, unhinged man determined to surgically and psychologically turn this podcaster into a walrus. In your video, you mentioned that you actually list Tusk in your dating profile, or at least you have in the past. Do you mind elaborating on your decision to include the movie as something that you like on such a public platform?
I put it on my dating profile as just like yo, like, this is the kind of shit that I like. So if you can't get down with Tusk, like, I mean, it can kind of work here and there, but like, this is what I'm about. So like, but if somebody sees that and they go, sounds good, I'm like, you're my kind of weird. Like, yeah. So
Yeah. It
yeah,
seems like an easy way to weed out the people that you don't want to interact with you.
100%.
Can you elaborate on what it is about that movie specifically that you like?
I believe my ex-wife had been on a flight and she was like, I watched this movie. Like, you should just watch it. And I was like, and I was at home and I'm like, all right, cool. And just went into it blind. And I'm like, this is just some weird, obscure, when people say there are no original horror like movies, I'm like, have you seen Tusk? Like, that was years and years and years back, but just like, how original to me. It's just like Kevin Smith and his brain. Love it. So
Yeah.
it's just, it's so unique and so weird and so obscure and so like, what the fuck? It's just like, I'm all in.
Yeah, 100% it is. It's a very singular movie. I've never seen anything like that. And a lot of body horror, I think I could say is like that as well. There's a lot of original pieces. I don't know. It still hits. It still holds up. It's still very weird, and it makes me feel so bizarre after because it's actually pretty tragic.
Oh yeah, no, that's like I've tried to explain this to my roommate Sean. He's like, the ending, man, I just can't get past the ending. I'm just like, well, that's the whole thing. Like he's like trapped in this walrus suit and like his girlfriend's like, you've lost your way, like you're non-emotional and all this kind of stuff. And
Hmm.
at the end, she's like, I love you, and she's walking away, and then he finally cries. And it's just kind of like, damn it, dude. It's just like you had to go through all this stuff to like get to that point, and now you're a fucking walrus.
Right.
It's so sad.
I don't know. Would you say for a genre like body horror, if it takes itself more seriously, then it can be more believable?
Tusk isn't an overly like serious film, but I think it takes itself seriously enough.
Hmm. I was thinking about Tusk up until this interview because I thought, what if I lost a partner that way? It's so absurd, but like the fact that they couldn't, I mean, it's them, they're living, but it's not them anymore, and there's nothing you can do. And now they have to live like an animal.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
how tragic is that? I mean, it totally took itself seriously in the end.
That's what I love about The Fly too.
Oh yeah,
Like it takes itself seriously.
100%.
Yeah.
That's a great connection. I mean, I feel like next to each other, those ending scenes are very similar. It's very unforgiving. Um, and there's something to be said about a movie that ends that way and is not afraid to end that way. And I think that's a nice segue into the next conversation I'd like to have with you. Now, in your pilot episode of your podcast, you mentioned that a springboard for Slasher Talk was your divorce and going through a divorce. And you mentioned that it changed your whole world and that it was tough. Of course, it was. And it's certainly an experience that you didn't wish for yourself to have.
Yeah.
That being said, horror fans, we do choose to discomfort ourselves by choosing to put on films like Tusk. So, what I would like to ask you is what does it mean for you to choose discomfort on your own terms through this genre?
Through the last 3 or 4 years of therapy, I've learned like I have, at least in the past, had a very hard time like processing emotions and just like knowing what exactly it is I'm feeling or having a safe space to feel and all that. And I think horror just allows you in your own room, in your safe space, wherever it is that you're watching it. It's just like it allows you to feel all different ranges of emotions, but like on your time, and you control it. Like if it becomes too much, you can hit pause.
Would you say that this genre is an easy reality escape?
Yeah, because it feels so surreal and unrealistic. Like chances are when you travel to Canada, you're not gonna get turned into a walrus.
Right.
Like, if you take some sort of like um body enhancing drug or whatever, you're not gonna have a younger version of yourself crawl out the back and like try to take over your life. And it's like that's not gonna, it's not like realistic.
Right.
But I do think body horror blurs that line of like everybody that's watching it, like you do have that fear of like being being not in control of your own body and you know, those types of things. So I feel like yes, it's unrealistic, but there's enough based in reality of like our fears.
Can you see body horror as a metaphor for rebuilding yourself after something destabilizing, whether it's a divorce or going through something tragic? Do you think this is a piece of media that people can use as a tool?
I personally do, yes. Um, just because like when you see I mean, like visually you're literally seeing people depending on like what movie you're watching use body horror as a way to transform. So whether they are putting somebody that's not willing, like they're unwillingly like transforming into something, or I would say grafted from last year, or yeah, last year, like she's using body horror to like make something like you know like be more popular and like benefit her life and things. So I yeah, there's you can look at it in different lights, but I definitely think there is a avenue that you can look at this as like I can tear myself down, you know, and build myself up to a new version of myself, whether that you want to be, you know, a fly or a walrus or whatever. But like, yeah, there's definitely an undertone there of like you can transform yourself into something else.
Now, during his divorce, body horror films became a site of comfort for Justin, where he can experience discomfort on his own terms. He was very much in control of when he wanted to feel uncomfortable. And I'm sure that felt very liberating when he was going through something so tough in his life that he had no control over, right? It's a great example that body horror is not just a site of identification, but it can be a site of comfort when real life feels uninhabitable. It's a safe space to explore different sorts of emotions where you don't have to live in fear of judgment. That being said, I would like to introduce the final fan that I have for this segment who brings another unique connection to body horror. My next featured fan is Aaliyah, based in London. Aaliyah is a body horror fan who hosts the Disability Horror Club in association with the Disability Action Research Collective. The Disability Horror Club is a group that meets once a month on Discord to explore disability representation in a singular horror film. Aaliyah, welcome to the crypt.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I think since the Disability Horror Club is new, that it deserves a moment of discussion. Do you mind sharing with us a little bit more information on why you chose to create this club in the first place?
Well, it was actually an idea pitched to me by Richard, who runs the Disability Action Research Collective. It's his baby. And they have a weekly film meetup. And because of my passion for horror films, and because there was a sort of a space to have a horror specific meetup, um, it was sort of a yeah, I'm not really sure whose idea it was to begin with, but it came to fruition regardless. It wanted to be born.
I'm curious, is this a club that only disabled people can be in?
No, not at all. I mean, it's for those who want to look at disability within horror films. Disability has been present in horror pretty much since its inception. Um, and yeah, it's for disabled people, of course, who want to come together and talk about a genre that we love, but also a genre that loves to hate us. And yeah, anyone's welcome. But it is predominantly to focus on disability representation in horror films and to provide a online communal space for people who want to talk about their favorite genre.
Speaking of, I think we should dive into then the first film. The first movie that I would like to talk about is the first movie you picked for the club, and it's David Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future. Now, this is
Yeah.
a film that follows performance artists who publicly showcase surgical body modifications as a society grapples with a strange evolutionary shift that blurs the line between biology, art, and control. Or, in a more simple explanation, guy grows useless organs, woman cuts them out very sensually, while others
Can I make it any
watch
more
in
obvious,
amazement.
you know?
Yeah, right. Why did you choose Crimes of the Future for the first film to discuss disability? Was it an obvious choice for you?
Kind of, you know. Well, I knew for January I wanted to get the year off with a bang. And obviously everyone's, making their New Year's resolutions, and it's within the title itself, Crimes of the Future. But it's also a film that I only watched last year. I watched it on a plane. I think I've seen, weirdly, the majority of my Cronenberg films on a plane,
Hmm.
on like long haul planes. And there's something really specific and spectacular about watching Cronenberg in like thousands of feet up in the air in total darkness on a plane. Everyone's asleep, and you're just watching some really freaky shit. It's fantastic. And I watched Crimes of the Future because it was available to download on BBC iPlayer. I'm a fan of Cronenberg, fan of horror and body horror. But I know that it had a very mixed reception. But it was his return to body horror, I think, for a long time.
Hmm.
Definitely over a decade. I'm not sure exactly how long. And I was blown away by it. I thought it's messy, it's glorious. This is disability praxis. Let me install a zipper on my stomach and eat plastic. And when it came to scheduling, I wanted to get a mix of modern and old horror. I wanted to get a mix of horror that, isn't too traumatic for disabled people to watch, stuff where you're watching, I thought month on month of watching stuff that is pretty bleak, it wouldn't be that fun. And yeah, so when it came to picking a film for January, I thought what better way to get the program off than with a modern Cronenberg, and one that posits a strange and weirdly optimistic view on the future despite everything that happens in the film, I think.
I think there's something interesting to be said about you watching Cronenberg films in a plane where you could not be further away from our actual reality. You're really,
Yeah.
really setting yourself up for an environment where you can be fully indulged in Cronenberg.
Yeah, for sure. I watched Videodrome as well. I say like I've watched majority of Cronenberg films on a plane. That sounds like I'm, Taylor Swifting around on a private jet. I'm not. I've seen two Cronenberg films on a long haul flight, one of them being Videodrome, the other being Crimes of the Future. And you're so right. It's something so surreal about being, thousands of feet away from reality, in this liminal space in a very Cronenberg adjacent place. I'm like, you would love it. Shout out Cronenberg. Hope you
Mhm.
know that I'm watching one of your films in a plane, because it's something to do. But yeah,
Now, when I contacted you for this interview, you also mentioned that you liked the film Titan,
I
which,
do.
right, spoilers, by the way, but Titan is about a serial killing woman who gets pregnant by a car, goes on the run, and then disguises herself as a missing boy, forming a strange yet tender bond with the boy's grieving father until her mechanical pregnancy violently reveals the truth. I noticed that you logged the film on Letterboxd in 2024 as a 3 star and then and then stated, quote, hmm. But in 2025, you logged a rewatched and then raised your rating to 4.5 stars. And it seems that you had a different appreciation for it. Can you explain to us what happened between those two viewings?
I can. Well, first of all, I'd like to say I enjoy Letterboxd, and I don't know if this is me being like neurodivergent or what. But I and I are about the star rating system and reviewing and how to use the app. I take that too seriously. Like there's no one, holding a gun to my head being like, you have to give your honest opinion, you have to rate this accurately, or so help me God. What even is an accurate rating? But it's something I do think about, as someone who thinks very deeply about stuff that's not necessarily very important.
Mm.
Um, so I would like to caveat it like that. And
Mm.
with Titan specifically, though, I watched it at a time where actually I was going through my own mysterious medical um, diagnosis issue. Um, I I didn't like it. It was too real. It was really visceral. I was actually in a place where I was feeling super sensitive. It was a really weird time in my life, to be honest. I mean, I watched this not necessarily related to disability, but I watched Let the Right One In, and I was like, this is fantastic. I really needed this right now. A film that a lot of people whom I love and respect were like, really, that's a hard pill to swallow, that film. And I was like, this is really helpful for me right now. Thank you. Um,
Mhm.
but Titan was, yeah, it was with the diagnostic process and the mysterious kind of ailment, shall we say, that I was having. I was like, this is a bit too close to home. Like, what if I'm pregnant with a car? What then? Like, what am I supposed to do about this? It's not really inspiring me with hope about this situation. Um, I was very tender and like a bit too soft for this. Not that that's a bad thing, but that's just how things were for me. And then, yeah, I watched it I think at some point last summer with my good Judy, Lil, who loves Titan and was like, I want to go see this with you at this really amazing cinema in London, like a specifically queer cinema. It's great. I forgot the name of it, but it's in Southwark. And yeah, we watched it and I was like, this is so fab. This is exactly what I needed. I'm I was coming up to a year of being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And I was like, yeah, this is exactly, yeah, I'm ready for this film now. I love the themes of like chosen family and yeah, things being the brutality of it was I was much more receptive to it. But yeah,
No, it makes a lot of sense because in the film, it's never discussed what is happening to the main character. The film refuses to explain what Alexia's condition is, so it makes
right.
sense that when you first were watching it and you were sort of confused what was happening with your own body, you felt alienated. You didn't want to confront um, what was
You're so
happening.
right.
Maybe you didn't want to figure out what was happening. It could have been you were impregnated by a car and you didn't know it. Um, but it sounds like it turned into something more empowering as you gave yourself some more time.
Yeah, I actually kind of hadn't clocked it like that. Just you saying that now, I'm like, oh shit, yeah, it was because I was like, I don't know what's going on and I need to know. I have like a very intense need to understand what is going on with my body. Like, the thing about MS is apparently it's called like the snowflake disease, not that like, uh Generation Snowflake are more prone to getting it. It's more that it's a disease that like presents differently for everybody.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, so its symptoms are really varied and, can go from very mild and constant in the background to like ramping up into like this is unignorable. And yeah, I hadn't been aware of it, but I'd had some relapses or episodes, whatever you want to call them. And I hadn't known, and I just kind of continued living as if that was like fine and normal. And yeah, so in hindsight, yeah, what happens in Titan, like how she like continues and living despite like her all the alarm bells and warning systems her body is like throwing at her and demanding to be seen and heard. That would hit a little too close to home. So I was like, this isn't fun. This isn't, this is I don't like this.
Do you think body horror, whether it was this film or another one, has ever helped you articulate something about your body that you couldn't put into words before?
Definitely, definitely. I mean, you know what? It's also because it's a very specific kind of language, right? I could reference, like Titan to you, and, you can see me and understand like what I'm talking about. But if someone isn't a horror fan, not just that they haven't seen Titan, but if they have and they're not a fan of it or body horror in general, they may not understand like exactly what I'm trying to convey or refer to or express. And I think that's really analogous to the experience of being disabled. Not everyone's going to hear you, not everyone's going to want to understand, you know, that we live within an ableist society. Um, and we all have like internal ableism as well. So yeah, I think body horror is a really unconventional and yet so apt, so perfect way of communicating and expressing the incommunicable, for sure.
I think that transitions nicely into my next question. It's obvious that body horror is a genre that's become a cathartic space for the disabled community,
Mm.
especially to reflect and rethink on our own bodies. But there are more lighthearted and easier genres that feature disabled characters, like whether it's autism in Rain Man or paralysis in Million Dollar Baby, even like aging bodies and Up. What do you think the benefit of watching disability representation and body horror is over other genres?
That's a really great question. I mean, something that comes to mind is also I understand why people don't like horror. I mean, we talked about how I did not like Titan to begin with because it was hitting too close to home. And one of the reasons for the specific Disability Horror Club, as opposed to incorporating it into Dark's weekly film analysis, is so that the film analysis space can remain one for people who want to talk about disability representation in cinema can come to without, seeing films that might be upsetting to them or something that they're really not comfortable watching. Whereas a horror specific space allow, we include like the link to Does the Dog Die, the content warning website in our monthly emails. Um, but it's a space that you know what potentially is going to come up and what's going to be discussed. It's a particular kind of language, right? A mode of, um, telling a story. Um, and it's not to say that disability representation can't be good in other genres. It absolutely can. But, Rain Man and Million Dollar Baby are films that have been critiqued and rightly so because their representation is like so sus, so sketch. I've seen Rain Man. I haven't seen Million Dollar Baby, but someone wrote a review for it, I think, in one of the other dark zines. We do through Disability Action Research Collective, we produce zines on different topics. It was in the eugenics specific zine that we did. Um, and yeah, with horror, I appreciate that it doesn't shy away from a reality that not everyone is comfortable discussing or wants to revisit. Um, but it's one that I'm interested in. It's one that I like to spend time in and watch. And, there's all sorts of reasons why people like horror. People talk about fear fascination and all sorts of theories around why we enjoy horror. But if you're living a semi-gnarly existence, it can feel quite comforting or validating to see those aspects of yourself, the parts that some, are relegated to the shadows, um, openly explored. I'm really grateful that I found horror, because yeah, there's parts of my existence that it expresses in a very poetic way, a very funny way, a very scary way, because a lot of it can and will be scary, and you know, it's okay to see it as such.
Aaliyah, if people watching want to continue discussions like this one, how can they contact you to join the Disability Horror Club?
If people would like to continue having these conversations, they can contact me at darkhorrorfilm@gmail.com. That's darkhorrorfilm@gmail.com, all one word, all lowercase.
Aaliyah's use of body horror as a connection to her own disability, as well as an outlet for community as well in the community of disabled people, really adds so much depth to body horror in terms of humanity, especially as a genre that on its surface seems to be a genre that hates people and hates the body. Now, before I close the Living Archive, I find it necessary that I need to locate myself in my own episode and share my own testimony because I am a fan of body horror and I think it's important to share my experiences as well. My connection to body horror has always been through Cronenberg. I've always been a huge David Cronenberg fan. Now, he quoted in an interview saying,
Right, the body for me is the essence of human existence.
Okay.
It is what we are.
as well as,
But for me, technology has always been ultra-human, a complete extension of what we are.
I've always found a lot of comfort in Cronenberg films because he saves space for something that I don't really see in any other type of film. And it's this idea of the human body merging with machine and then becoming somehow even more attractive. You usually don't see that in film. You usually see man becomes machine, becomes monstrous, or becomes ugly. And that's something that I've struggled with a lot of my life because I have type 1 diabetes and I wear a lot of equipment, especially these past couple of years. I always have a CGM on me and I always have an insulin pump. I'm always ticking, I'm always beeping, I'm always connected through Bluetooth to something. I have this on me 24 hours every day, and I will every day for the rest of my life. And I've struggled with this idea of being what feels like part machine has made me part ugly, right? I've always felt like my body was part machine, part human, and part something else. But Cronenberg films have truly taught me to be part machine, part human, and then part sexy or part attractive. It really has become a space where I can see myself as someone who's truly attractive, even though I have medical equipment on me at all times.
The reshaping of the human body by modern technology.
Watching his characters fuse with their devices and adapt to them and claim them as part of their identity has honestly helped me make sense of my own body and look at my body differently, more positively. And a lot of that can be attributed to Cronenberg films. And that being said, I think it's a good point in the episode to close the circle. Now, from the Tombstone text to the Communication Codex to the Living Archive, we have explored how body horror movies have moved from ancient fears to cultural theory to lived experiences from fans themselves, including my own. Now, in closing the circle, we can see that body horror isn't just a genre of rupture, but a genre of recognition where theory and fandom all meet in the flesh. Now, the point of this series is to help open people up to maligned media. It's to help fans articulate their interests more clearly. It's to help people outside of fandom understand why we're into things that are strange and unusual, and also help outsiders understand why they were maybe turned off by a genre in the first place. Now, if you want to open yourself up to body horror more, or even if you're a fan and you want to get into the genre more, I want to leave you with 3 spoiler-free recommendations. The first one I want to leave you with is more beginner level. It's Black Swan. This is a film that follows a perfection-obsessed ballerina. It's perfect for beginners because there's a lot of lead up to the body horror elements. It doesn't consume the whole film. Now, for the intermediate level, I'd like to introduce you to David Cronenberg's Existence. This is definitely an underwatched, underappreciated David Cronenberg. It follows a game designer who is on the run from assassins, and it's a really great introduction to the director. And lastly, for the more experienced fan, I want to introduce you to The Ugly Stepsister. This is a really interesting riff on the Cinderella story, and I'm just going to leave it at that. It came out last year. I've already seen it a couple of times. It is intense. That's why it's the last one that I'm recommending. But I think you should give it a try if anything that I've said to you today has piqued your interest at all. And with that, I want to thank you for joining me in the Communication Crypt. Until next time, honor your body, hold your stories close, and don't be afraid of a little transformation.
If you'd like to make a call, please hang up and try again. If you need